Hi, I'm Maura, and on the day I married the man I loved, my mother-in-law stood up, smiled sweetly, and said, "We've decided the car your parents gave you should go to his sister. She deserves it more." Then my husband laughed and said, "Relax, it's just a car." But it wasn't just a car. It was a message, a quiet way of saying, "You don't belong here." And I smiled, because that's what good brides do. But that day, something inside me cracked, and one sentence, just one, would make every smile in that room disappear. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from right now? And have you ever realized that the people smiling beside you were the ones slowly taking everything you had? The sun dipped behind the palms as I stepped onto the aisle runner, my hand tightening around the bouquet that wasn't quite mine. It was chosen by Chandra. The music played, soft and elegant, and everyone turned to look. All eyes were on the bride, on me, but it didn't feel like it. The air smelled of salt and lilies. Sarasota was glowing in that late spring kind of way. Just warm enough to sweat under a silk gown, just cool enough to pretend it was intentional. I moved carefully, like I was gliding, like I'd practiced. Smiling. God, that smile. I had worn it so long it felt like part of my skin. And yet, as I walked forward, I noticed something that pulled at the corner of my confidence. Chandra stood near the altar, her posture flawless, her pearls catching the last golden thread of sunlight. She wasn't the bride, but she moved like royalty. Like this was her coronation, not mine. The way people looked at her, laughed a little too loudly at her comments, it made me feel like a guest at my own wedding. When I reached the front, Darius barely met my eyes. He looked preoccupied, adjusting his cuff, glancing at the minister like we were running behind. Not nervous, not eager, just distracted. My chest tightened, but I smiled wider. After the vows, clean, short, no personal touches, while guests filtered toward the reception area, I slipped aside to glance at the seating chart. Something felt off. Maybe I needed a moment to breathe. Or maybe something in my gut told me not to get too comfortable. There it was, a white easel by the entrance, dripping in florals. I scanned the head table first. My name was printed in an elegant serif font, Mrs. Darius Cole. A shiver ran through me. It wasn't fear or joy, just disorientation. I hadn't signed my name that way before. I touched it, tracing the curve of the C. Was this what becoming someone's wife looked like? Beautiful, neat, a little unfamiliar. I kept scanning. My parents' names weren't near ours, not at the front, not even close. I followed the list down, row by row, until I found them. Table 9, behind a giant floral arch, next to the restrooms. What? Just then, Chandra's voice floated beside me. "We had to move them, dear. Closer to the AC. It's better for them at that age. You know how Florida gets." She didn't pause for a reaction. She walked past, gracefully, as if she'd just offered me tea and not humiliation wrapped in lavender-scented logic. I stood still, fingers curled around the edge of the chart. My smile held, but my jaw ached from it. My mother didn't say a word. When I reached their table later, she stood to hug me, her perfume familiar and grounding. My father just nodded. That's the kind of man he is, quiet, protective, choosing peace over protest. He said nothing, but I saw it in his eyes. That flicker of apology. Like he wished he could have shielded me from this. Inside, I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was cooler in that back corner. Maybe the florist messed up the chart. But no. Chandra didn't do maybe. She did intention. The reception continued like clockwork. Darius gave a short thank you speech. His sister cried, even though she was barely mentioned. The food was beautiful, plated like artwork. At the head table, I tried to enjoy it, tried to be present. I glanced at my name again. Mrs. Darius Cole. My fingers traced the edge of the card. It was just a name, I told myself. Just a formality. But it felt like a trade. As glasses clinked and waiters whisked by, I looked back at my parents' table. Dad met my gaze again, gave a small nod. Not the kind people give when they're proud. The kind that says, "I'm still here, if you need me." I wanted to cry. Instead, I reached for my champagne and waited. The music swelled as Chandra rose, elegant as ever, glass in hand. "To family," she said, her voice honey-sweet. "To the ones who make us who we are." Everyone clapped, laughed, toasted. I smiled again. But this time, when I caught my reflection in the glass, I didn't recognize her. That woman with perfect lipstick and tired eyes. That woman who had smiled all day but felt invisible. That woman was me. If only I'd known that toast wasn't a blessing. It was a warning. The clinking of glasses faded into murmurs, laughter, and the soft scrape of chairs shifting on marble. I stepped down from the head table and took a long sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp against the back of my throat. I needed a second to breathe, not to cry, just to think. The reception was in full swing now. Warm amber lights glowed under the tent canopy, casting soft halos around everything. Jazz played in the background, blending into the sea breeze. I drifted toward the cake table, where a gilded box sat, collecting cards and envelopes from well-meaning guests. It looked almost ceremonial. I watched a couple from Darius's side, people I didn't even know, drop in an envelope and make a point of laughing a little too loudly. Beside the box stood Lassie, his sister, a vision in blush chiffon and gleaming teeth. She wasn't just hovering, she was keeping tally. I saw her scan the envelope discreetly before it disappeared inside. "That one's from Uncle Steve," she murmured as if to herself, but loud enough for the woman beside her to nod. Chandra stood nearby, admiring her like she'd just watched her daughter win a scholarship. "She's so organized," she beamed. "Reminds me of myself when I married into the Coles." The group chuckled. I smiled too, like a reflex. But it didn't reach my eyes. Something about the whole thing made my stomach tighten, not in a dramatic gut punch way, but like a slow, winding knot. I wandered back toward the dining area. My name, no, his name, still sat neatly folded at the head table. Mrs. Darius Cole. I hadn't picked it. I hadn't even seen it until the ceremony started, but there it was, like a contract I didn't know I'd signed. Dinner began with clinking forks and cheerful small talk. I sat straight, listening more than speaking. Jamie, my old college roommate, and the only friend from my side who made the trip, leaned over and whispered, "You good?" I nodded. "Of course." The lie came easy. Halfway through the meal, Chandra rose, glass in hand. "We thought it'd be fun," she announced, "to open a few family gifts up here. Just a little tradition." My fork paused midair. This wasn't discussed, but Darius touched my wrist lightly. "It's fine, babe. She loves this stuff. Let her have her moment." "Her moment," I echoed, under my breath. They brought up the first package, wrapped in gold foil and topped with an artificial white rose. I smiled, clapped politely. Chandra unwrapped it slowly, theatrically. "It's from us," she declared. "A little something from the Coles to commemorate the day." Inside was a large framed collage, dozens of photos arranged neatly. But as I looked closer, the unease tightened. Every photo was of Darius. Darius as a baby. Darius in high school. Darius and Lacey. Darius with his father. Not one of me. Not even the engagement photos we'd taken months ago. "Guess it's clear who the favorite is," someone muttered behind me. A few people laughed. I forced a smile, my jaw aching from the effort. "What a thoughtful gift," I managed. Inside, though, something cracked. It wasn't the collage, it was the message. I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded on purpose. This wasn't an accident. This was a statement. Jamie leaned in again. That was weird, right? I'm fine, I said again. Always fine. The lights dimmed a little more as dessert was served. Slices of lemon cake and tiny chocolate squares. I barely touched mine. I was too busy replaying the moment in my head. Then came the final blow. Wrapped in silk and sealed with a smile. Chandra raised her glass again. One more little surprise, she said, eyes bright. Next week, we'll be moving the car Mora's parents gave her to Lacey's house. She needs it for work. We figured you two wouldn't mind, right? A pause. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped. Another guest shouted, "Family first!" I stared at her, then at Darius. Surely he'd stop this. Surely he'd say something. Instead, he chuckled. "Relax, it's just a car." Just a car. My lungs stopped working for a beat. Even the violinist seemed to miss a note. There it was, the line I wasn't supposed to cross, the place I was supposed to smile, nod, and be grateful. I looked down. My hand had curled around the name tag again. Mrs. Darius Cole. The paper creased under my grip. I stood, raised my own glass, and said, loud enough to be heard but soft enough to seem harmless, "You're right, it's just a car." But inside, I knew it was more. It was the moment I realized silence doesn't protect you. It invites the next insult. I thought silence would save me. Instead, it made them bolder. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the curtains, slicing across the room like a truth I wasn't ready to face. The bed beside me was cold, the pillow untouched. Darius had always been an early riser, but something about that empty space felt deliberate, like he'd escaped before the weight of last night could reach him. The air still smelled faintly of roses and champagne, both gone sour overnight. I sat up slowly, the sheets creasing under my palms. My wedding ring glinted against the light, too shiny, too new, too foreign. Darius stood by the window, already dressed in a crisp shirt, phone in hand. He wasn't looking at me, just scrolling, smiling faintly, probably at some text from his mother or his sister. I cleared my throat. "Did that car thing bother you at all?" He didn't look up. "What car thing?" I stared at him. "You know exactly what I mean." "Oh." He chuckled softly, still reading. "That? Mom didn't mean it that way. You're too sensitive, babe." Too sensitive. Two words that felt harmless until they settled in your bones. I wanted to ask if he realized how sharp they were, but he turned to me, kissed my forehead lightly, like punctuation on a conversation already over. "You're overthinking again," he said, checking his watch. "Don't ruin the mood, okay? We had a great night. Let's not start the morning like this." He picked up his jacket. "I'm gonna check on Mom before she heads out. She wasn't feeling well." Of course she wasn't. Chandra always had the perfect timing when she needed an exit or attention. I didn't say anything as the door clicked shut, just listened to the waves outside. The silence after him leaving wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like someone had closed a lid over my thoughts. I pulled my knees up and stared out at the ocean. Yesterday's laughter felt far away now. The same people who had toasted to family would probably tell each other, "She's lucky to marry into the Coles." Maybe I was lucky, if luck meant learning to smile through slow humiliation. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe it was just a joke gone wrong. But then again, hadn't every insult been dressed as a joke? I got out of bed, wrapped the robe tighter around me, and noticed something on the nightstand. My name tag from the reception, Mrs. Darius Cole. The corners were slightly bent, lipstick smudged near the edge where my fingers must have brushed it. It didn't look like my name. It looked like a mask, a polite version of me that everyone else preferred. Agreeable, patient, unbothered. I wondered when I'd learned to wear that so well. The phone buzzed. A text from Jamie. "You handled last night with Grace, but don't let Grace turn into a cage." I read it twice, then again. Grace as a cage. It stuck in my head, echoing through the quiet room. She didn't need to say, "more." She saw it too. The subtle power games, the small humiliations that everyone else dismissed as family things. I walked toward the balcony and pushed the door open. The ocean air hit me hard, cool and salt-heavy. People were already walking the beach below. Couples, joggers, a family setting up umbrellas. They all looked free. And I, the new bride, felt like the only person locked inside a beautiful lie. My phone buzzed again, this time with a different tone. Email, subject, title transfer. Confirmed. My chest tightened as I opened it. The car, the one my parents had given me as a wedding gift, the one Chandra had joked about, was no longer mine. The document attached confirmed the transfer to Lacey Cole. They didn't ask. They just did it. Because they assumed I'd stay quiet. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even forward it to Darius. I simply deleted the message. Then, after a moment, I went into the trash folder and restored it. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, no more deleting myself. I sat there, phone in hand, the ocean light shimmering against the screen. Somewhere deep down, something began to stir. Not anger yet, but awareness. The kind that grows slowly, silently, until it demands to be heard. That's when I started listening. Not to them, but to the silence between their words. That's when I started listening. Not to them, but to the silence between their words. And what I heard was louder than I expected. A week passed. The wedding haze dissolved, but not completely. Bits of it still clung to surfaces, in the form of thank you cards stacked on the coffee table, or dried petals from Chandra's bouquet arrangement, which she insisted we display in the foyer. Every corner of our apartment whispered her name. Technically, it was our apartment, a sleek two-bedroom with ocean light pouring through big glass windows, polished floors, high-end everything. But emotionally, it belonged to someone else. I hadn't chosen the curtains or the dining set or even the rug. Chandra had sent a team to help us settle in before we even got the keys. A gift, she'd said, as if it was generosity, not control. That morning, I was unpacking the last of the boxes. Most were marked in Darius's handwriting. One was taped in a different shade of beige, elegant, intentional. Inside, folded linens and ceramic vases wrapped in ivory tissue. Tucked beneath one of the place settings was a card. From Chandra. "So you'll always have a piece of our home. Our, not yours, not even mine. Just our, as in hers and Darius's." The note was scented, probably some designer fragrance. I stared at it longer than I should have, then slid it into the junk drawer. Later that afternoon, I was setting the table when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Chandra, perfectly composed, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. Her smile was tight and practiced. "I hope you don't mind, dear. I brought Lacey's favorite. She'll be joining us for dinner." I hadn't cooked. I hadn't planned. I hadn't even known she was coming. But before I could say anything, Darius appeared behind me. "That's sweet, Mom. Come in." Of course it was sweet. It was always sweet. On the surface. Dinner smelled like butter and guilt. I lit a candle, more out of habit than ambiance, and sat down as they poured wine, already mid-conversation. Lacey was in a new dress, probably gifted by Chandra too. She didn't ask about the apartment or how I'd been. She just scrolled through her phone between bites. Chandra took the lead, as always, reminiscing about wedding details, every story beginning with "when we planned the wedding," never "when Maura planned," or even "when the couple planned." Just we, as if I'd been a bystander at my own ceremony. At one point, I tried to slide in. About the car, I'd prefer if we gave it a bit more time before. Chandra didn't miss a beat. Oh, sweetheart, you said it was fine, remember? Don't tell me you're changing your mind now. Darius laughed lightly. Yeah, Mora, you did say that. I hadn't, not once. But everyone at the table nodded, smiling, sipping. The lie settled like fog, and I couldn't see through it fast enough to respond. My throat tightened. Not from the food, but from the invisible hand squeezing my voice. I looked around and saw the picture. Chandra seated like a queen, Lacey giggling like royalty in waiting, Darius caught between loyalty and convenience, and me, barely a shape at the table. When dinner ended, Chandra placed the leftovers in my fridge, her fridge, really, and kissed me on the cheek with that same cold grace. Let me know if you need anything, dear. You're part of us now. Once they were gone, silence returned. Not peace, just the absence of noise. I cleared the plates slowly, rinsing them under the tap. The wine glasses clinked as I set them down. And that's when I saw it again, on the wall by the hallway, framed, perfectly centered, a wedding tag. Mrs. Darius Cole. I hadn't framed it, she had. A decorator's touch, she'd said, but it didn't feel like art, it felt like branding. I pressed my fingers against the glass, smudging it slightly. If they saw me as decoration, I'd learn to speak like fire. That night, the apartment echoed with emptiness. Darius had stepped out for a quick drive, leaving behind only his cologne in the hallway and a half-hearted "be back soon." I stood in the kitchen, looking at my reflection in the mirrored backsplash. My face split in two, one calm, one raging. Two versions of me, fighting to coexist. I whispered, "If this is a war, I'll win it in silence." And silence, I realized, has its own kind of power, one that listens before it strikes. 2 weeks passed. The air in Sarasota had shifted, heavy with the scent of summer rain and wet pavement. It had rained all morning, not a storm, just a soft, constant tap against windows, like a warning with no thunder. At work, I kept my head down. My desk at the design studio sat by the corner window. Usually, the beach view calmed me. That day, though, the ocean blurred behind gray glass. I had just finished sketching out a kitchen redesign when I heard my coworker, Celeste, laugh softly from the break room behind me. "Wait, so your sister-in-law gave her the car?" she said. Another voice, maybe Hannah, replied, "That's what I heard, from the Cole family. So generous." My hand stopped mid-line, pencil hovering above paper. They were talking about my car, my parents' gift. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and let the sentence replay in my mind, over and over again. The version Chandra must have circulated, polished and perfect. Kindness rebranded as charity. Their betrayal recast as benevolence. On my lunch break, I stepped outside under the building's overhang and pulled out my phone. The rain had let up slightly, just a light mist now. I opened Instagram, typed Lacey Cole into the search bar. There she was, smiling, hand on the hood of the car. The same champagne-colored SUV my dad picked out for me last Christmas. Captioned beneath, "Grateful for family who always believed in me. Couldn't do it without you, Mom." A heart emoji. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. She deserves it. Chandra is a queen. Real family support. I stared at the screen, thumb frozen. And then slowly, I began to feel it. Not rage, not hurt. Something sharper, clearer, control. That night, I met Avery at a cafe tucked behind a bookstore near the bay. She looked the same. Still sharp, still dressed like court was always just one call away. I slid into the booth, still soaked from the short walk inside. She looked up from her tea and smiled. "Wow," she said. "Newlywed gloom is real, huh?" I didn't bother with small talk. Did you know a car title can be transferred without both signatures? Her brow lifted slightly. No, not legally, at least. I leaned forward, because apparently, that's what happened to me. She blinked, slow and thoughtful. You didn't sign a release. Not a thing, I said. Not a form, not a phone call, nothing. Avery set down her tea. Then it wasn't legal. And just like that, the noise in my chest quieted. Not because the situation had changed, but because someone finally saw it for what it was. They made it look like I gave it to her, I said. Avery folded her hands. Let them keep thinking that. I stared out the window. The rain had returned, tracing long diagonal lines across the glass. For the first time, I said softly, my silence feels useful. Silence, she said, is only dangerous when you don't own it. Later that evening, I walked back into the apartment. Darius was on the couch, scrolling his phone. The TV played some game show rerun. I could smell leftovers warming in the microwave. You've been quiet lately, he said without looking up. Everything okay? I'm just learning to listen, I replied, pulling off my damp coat. He smiled, distracted. Good, that's healthy. He thought I was healing. He thought I was adjusting. He had no idea I was documenting. After dinner, he left to meet a friend at the gym. I didn't ask which friend. I didn't care. With the apartment quiet again, I walked slowly down the hall, past the framed wedding tag, Mrs. Darius Cole. Framed not by me, of course, but by Chandra. Still there, like a stamp on borrowed property. I paused in front of it. For once, I didn't feel ashamed or invisible. I felt ready. Back in our bedroom, I turned on my laptop, pulled up a blank folder, and titled it with one word, Truth. Inside it, I began saving what I had, screenshots of social posts, the dealership email, messages from friends, receipts from my parents, bank statements, notes, everything, evidence. They'd built a story. Now I was building the facts. This wasn't rage anymore. It was record-keeping. I sat in the glow of the screen, listening to the distant hum of traffic outside and the rain returning in waves. Then, almost without thinking, I whispered to the quiet room, they built the story. I'll build the evidence. I said it that night with a kind of calm I didn't recognize in myself. Not rage, not sorrow. Just a quiet focus. The kind that comes when you stop hoping someone will save you and realize you'll have to save yourself. 3 weeks after the wedding, I had already memorized the sound of the rain tapping on my office window. Patient, repetitive, unrelenting. It was the perfect soundtrack for what I was becoming. I stayed late that night, long after the last designer had gone home. The studio lights hummed low as I opened my laptop. My inbox blinked back at me. Thousands of unread messages layered across years of life I'd been too polite to examine. I started searching. Cole. Dealership. Title. At first, nothing. Then one email thread appeared. Subject line, transfer confirmation. My stomach tightened. I clicked. There it was. A series of exchanges between Chandra Cole and the dealership. My name appeared on the carbon copy list, a legal requirement apparently, but I had never seen the messages. And attached at the bottom, a digital signature that looked eerily like mine. Not just similar, identical. The dealership rep had even written, "Thank you for confirming, Mrs. Cole. The title will be released by Friday." I leaned back, eyes stinging from the screen. My breath came slow and shallow. This wasn't manipulation anymore. This was fraud. And somehow, I wasn't surprised. The next morning, I met Avery at a cafe tucked under a canopy of palms. She was already there when I arrived, a folder open in front of her, glasses perched low on her nose. I slid the printed emails across the table. She read them once, then again. Her eyes darkened. "This isn't just wrong," she said quietly. It's criminal. The coffee between us went cold as I stared at the condensation sliding down my glass. She'll say it was love, I murmured. Avery's voice softened. People like her always do. They call it protection, guidance, family duty, anything but what it really is. Control, I said. She nodded. Exactly. I asked her what to do. She told me what I already knew. Document, wait, and don't confront her yet. She rewrites history faster than you can print proof, Avery warned. I smiled faintly. Good. Let her think she still owns the script. Avery reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You've got this, Maura. Just play it smart. That evening, the rain hadn't stopped. It painted thin rivers down the windows as I sat at my desk at home, my laptop glowing against the dim light. Darius was in the living room watching a game, his laughter muffled behind the wall. I opened our shared bank account, something I hadn't checked in weeks. The numbers blinked up, ordinary at first. Then I started scrolling, spa visits, tuition transfers, a vacation deposit, all in Lacey's name, all marked family, expense. Every one of them signed off as authorized by Darius Cole. My pulse slowed. They weren't just taking, they were comfortable taking. I printed every page one by one until the printer tray emptied. The sheets came out warm, the ink smelling faintly like iron. I stacked them neatly, tapping the edges into place as though tidying proof could make it less real. Darius came into the room later, towel around his neck, hair damp from the gym. He kissed the top of my head, already scrolling through his phone. You've been distant lately, he said. Everything okay? I turned to him. Did you know your mom used our account for Lacey? He barely looked up. Yeah, I told her she could. It's family, Maura. You're being petty. That word, petty. The same word Chandra used at the wedding when she took something that wasn't hers and made it sound like generosity. I studied him for a long moment. The way he smiled absently, the way his fingers never left his screen. I realized then that he wasn't a victim of her control. He was its willing product. He'd chosen comfort over conscience. Right, I said softly. Family. He didn't hear the crack in my voice, or maybe he just didn't care to. When he went to bed, I walked into the hallway. The framed wedding tag still hung where Chandra had insisted, Mrs. Darius Cole, glossy, perfect, centered. I lifted it off the nail, flipped it face down, and set it gently on the console table. No longer a mask, just a warning. Back in the office, I filed the bank statements into the same folder I'd named Truth. Each page slid in with the sound of quiet finality. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to beg. I was collecting ammunition, paper instead of rage. They took my name for convenience. Now I'd make it their consequence. It wasn't the paperwork that broke me. It was how calm I had to be while building it. That week passed with mechanical rhythm. Mornings began with quiet coffee and a glance at the folder I kept hidden in the third drawer under our printer, labeled Truth. Evenings were spent in polite conversations with Darius about the weather, dinner plans, and weekend brunches I might enjoy if I tried. I smiled at the right moments, laughed when expected. I had become an actress in my own life. Sunday arrived like it always did in the Cole household, with pristine linens, fresh flowers, and invisible tension that clung to everything like humidity. Chandra's invitation had come on heavy cardstock, tucked inside a gold envelope. A celebration of family and new beginnings, it read. I knew better. We arrived right on time. The table was already set, gleaming cutlery, wine glasses, and a centerpiece of white lilies so large it blocked half my view. Chandra floated around in cream-colored silk, looking like royalty playing hostess. Darius stayed close to her, laughing too easily. This is lovely, I said, sliding into my chair. My voice was steady, my smile smooth. I had rehearsed both. "Oh, Mora, you're sweet," Chandra cooed. "I wanted this to feel united." Then came the first move. "I've been thinking," she said, pouring mimosas with a grace that felt rehearsed. "We should consider merging household finances. Transparency builds trust, don't you think?" Lacey immediately nodded. "Totally agree. It's what families do." Darius looked to me, waiting for my approval. I took a slow breath and gently set my napkin in my lap. "Transparency's important, but so are boundaries." The air shifted. It wasn't loud, but something in the way Chandra set the pitcher down made the glass clink too hard against the table. She smiled again, thinner this time. "Oh, of course, dear, but boundaries are for outsiders, not family." I met her gaze. Boundaries protect what matters. No one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hold its breath. Brunch continued like theater. Every forklift, every wine pour, a performance. Lacey chatted about her new spa membership. "A gift from Mom and Darius," she beamed. "And that car drives like a dream. Honestly, feels like a fresh start." My fork paused midair. I heard Avery's voice in my head. "Don't confront yet. Wait until the right moment." I forced a smile. "It must." Chandra watched me closely. She knew I knew. Halfway through dessert, something glazed and unnecessarily complicated, she leaned closer across the table. Her voice dropped just enough for only me to hear. "I hope we don't have to make this difficult for you, Mora." I tilted my head slightly. My tone was calm, nearly affectionate. "You already did." I reached into my purse and placed a sealed envelope beside my plate. Quietly, deliberately. Chandra glanced at it, then back at me. She didn't open it, but her fingers faltered on the stem of her wine glass. I didn't explain. She knew. Inside were the printed emails, the forged signature, the dealership correspondence, the bank records. All of it. Her smile returned. Almost. "You misunderstood our intentions." "No," I said softly. "You underestimated mine." The room seemed to slow. Even Darius, still busy charming his mother, looked over, sensing something shift. I didn't need to raise my voice. Silence had become my weapon. In my purse, folded neatly beside my phone, was the wedding tag. Mrs. Darius Cole. Not framed, not hung. Just paper now. Evidence of what they thought I should be. I stood slowly. My chair scraped lightly against the hardwood. I didn't wait for permission. "You've mistaken my silence for weakness," I said, voice steady. "That was your first mistake." Then I left the room, heels echoing on tile, without looking back. Their second mistake was thinking I'd stay quiet forever. 2 months had passed since that brunch. The day I laid my cards on the table and walked away with my dignity intact. And yet, I knew this wasn't over. Not for them, not for me. People like Chandra didn't lose battles. They rewrote them. And I had a feeling she was already drafting a new version. So when the invitation arrived, printed in heavy cream cardstock with gold foil lettering, I knew what it really meant. The Cole Family Foundation Annual Gala. A night of charity, appearances, control. Of course, I RSVP'd yes. I spent the week leading up to the gala tightening loose ends, documents organized, digital backups stored off-site, and Avery looping me in on what to say, what not to say, and what would hit hardest. She didn't need to be there to hold my hand. Her voice over the phone was enough. "You're not there to explode, Mora," she said. "You're there to dismantle, calmly." I smiled. I've been practicing. The night of the event, I chose a simple black gown. No shimmer, no lace, no statement. Just clean lines and quiet defiance. I wore my hair up, my expression unreadable. When I walked into that grand ballroom, I didn't walk in like a guest. I walked in like a witness. The place sparkled. Strings of lights draped from the ceiling, soft jazz hummed in the background, champagne flutes clinked in polished hands. And at the center of it all stood Chandra, regal in red, flanked by Lassie and Darius. She greeted people like royalty, all elegance and orchestration. Lassie was buzzing with attention, posing beside the family's charity display like it was her personal billboard. I caught Darius scanning the room every so often. When he saw me, he smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He wasn't sure which version of me had shown up tonight. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, content in the shadows, sipping my drink while watching her work the room. Then the announcement came from the podium. "And now," said the event coordinator, a local news anchor with perfect teeth, "we'd like to invite Mrs. Maura Cole, our newlywed, to say a few words as part of the family." I hadn't planned to speak, but I knew they had. Chandra's eyes locked on mine, her smile wide. "Come, dear, you're family. Share something lovely." I walked slowly to the stage, every step deliberate. My heart didn't race. My hand didn't shake. I'd already lived through the worst of it. This was just the echo. I adjusted the microphone and looked out. The room quieted quickly. "When people show you who they are," I began, "believe them. I did, eventually." A few polite chuckles, confused glances. Chandra's smile froze. "I'm sure many of you have heard about how generously the Cole family gave my sister-in-law a car. Some called it a beautiful gesture, others inspiring." I paused. The air tightened. "But it wasn't a gift. It was theft." There it was. The first ripple. Lacey's face turned white. Darius took a half-step forward, mouthing something I didn't catch. I pulled a small envelope from my clutch, the same kind I left at brunch. "This is the forged paperwork used to transfer the title from my name to someone else's. Without my consent, without my knowledge." Chandra didn't blink, but her hands clenched just slightly at her sides. I won't bore you with legal jargon, but let's just say she won't be driving that car much longer. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the servers stopped moving. Family doesn't take what isn't theirs. It never did, and never will, again. And with that, I gently set the microphone down. No dramatic toss, no shaking voice, just truth, laid bare. I stepped down from the platform. Behind me, the room erupted. Whispers, gasps, chairs shifting. I didn't turn to see the aftermath. I didn't need to. Lacey burst into tears. Darius stood frozen. Chandra's expression didn't change, but her posture did. A queen stripped of her illusion. From the corner of the room, I saw Jamie, camera in hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. I passed by the registration table on my way out. I reached into my purse, pulled out the folded wedding tag, Mrs. Darius Cole, and dropped it in the trash without looking back. Outside, the night air was cooler than I expected. Crisp, still. I took a breath. The kind you only take when you've stopped pretending. Freedom doesn't roar. It exhales. "Finally," I whispered. The buzz from that gala faded faster than I expected. The clip went viral for a few days. Jamie told me her phone nearly exploded with texts from people we hadn't heard from in years. Some offered sympathy, others offered silence. But life has a way of softening even the sharpest echo. It's been 3 months now. I live by the water. Just a small apartment in Sarasota, with pale wood floors and tall windows that drink in the late afternoon sun. The kind of space that doesn't need much, just breath and quiet. It's the first place I've ever lived alone, and oddly, I don't feel lonely here. There's a potted plant on the windowsill, a small, sturdy thing my father gave me. "You'll like this one," he said. "It only grows if you give it a little attention every day. Not too much. Just steady care." It's thriving. I water it like clockwork. the same time every afternoon when the light turns soft and gold. That's usually when the memories come, not like ghosts, more like visitors I've learned to stop resenting. Today, as I pressed the watering can's spout to the soil, I heard the mail slot clink. A letter. I set the can down and walked barefoot across the cool floor to the door. It was from Avery. Her handwriting was neat and intentional, just like her. Maura. Case closed. The fraudulent title transfer has been reversed. Legally, the car is yours again. Congratulations. You earned every bit of this. I read the words twice. They didn't bring joy, not like winning. They brought something quieter, like closure. A couple days later, I drove to the dealership, the same one where Chandra had orchestrated her little signature show. The manager recognized me. He was polite, maybe more cautious than before. "We, have your keys ready," he said. "Everything's been cleared up on our end." He handed them to me gently, as if they might still burn. "I gotta say," he added, "most people would have come in swinging, demanding heads roll. You were quiet." I smiled, small but sincere. Revenge was the byproduct. I just wanted my name back. He nodded, understanding in a way I didn't expect. I didn't keep the car. I sold it. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, watching the moon sketch silver lines on the waves. That's when the phone rang. Darius. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice cracked like he hadn't used it in a while. "She's not doing well," he said. "My mom, she says, you ruined her." I didn't raise my voice. "No, I just stopped helping her hide what she already was." There was a long pause. Then, quieter, "I didn't know how deep it went." "You didn't want to," I said gently. "I just—" His words tangled. "I don't want this to be how we end." I looked out at the ocean, my heart not angry anymore, just tired. "Some apologies come after the echo fades, Darius. By then, they're just noise." I didn't wait for his answer. I hung up. The next morning, I drove to the beach, the same one my parents used to take me to as a kid. The sand still had that same chalky softness. The waves still rolled in, certain as breath. I walked to the edge of the water and pulled the old wedding tag from my purse. Mrs. Darius Cole. The edges were worn, the ink slightly faded. I'd kept it longer than I should have. Not because I missed the name, but because I wanted to remember the weight of silence I once carried under it. I knelt, dug a shallow hole with my fingers, and placed the tag in the sand. When the tide reached it, it lifted the paper like a memory, then carried it away. I didn't cry. That afternoon, Trent met me at the pier. He didn't say much at first, just handed me a cup of coffee and stood beside me like he had all the time in the world. "You didn't just stand up to them," he said eventually. "You stood up for yourself." I looked at him, tears brimming but not falling. "That," I said, "was the hardest part." We watched the sunset in silence, not the kind that comes from tension, the kind that heals. Back at my apartment, I opened the windows wide and let the salt air fill the rooms. The plant still stood tall, its leaves reaching toward the light. Before heading to bed, I flipped on the radio, a habit I picked up since moving in. A familiar song came on, one they played at the wedding reception. Once it would have stung, but now it was just melody. I smiled. Not a performance, not for anyone, just me. I whispered into the air. I finally came home. Silence isn't surrender, it's survival, until it becomes power.